Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining to today's webinar. We will start in a couple of minutes. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, How to Complete Integration Projects 300% Faster. In today's webinar, we'll cover speaker introductions and their experiences, the state of the industry, Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, How to Complete Integration Projects by 300%. In today's webinar, we will cover speaker introductions and their experiences, the state of the industry, top pain points that organizations are facing today, and how integration challenges are the root cause. Then we will dive into the secrets and ways companies are addressing these pain points. Then we will wrap up with some helpful resources you can take away and Q&A. So before we begin today's webinar, I'd like to cover some housekeeping items. First, you can view resources in the attachment and links section. You can submit questions to the chat box window at any time, and we will answer them during the Q&A portion. We will also share some helpful resources at the end of the session. Okay, so my name is Karen He, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. In today's webinar, we have two seasoned leaders in the integration space. Alan Leong is a principal architect from CloudFormation Pro and has over 10 years of experience in enterprise architectural design and has deployed robust implementations in large enterprises and startups, including Box. Janet Jaswell is the VP of Product Marketing at SnapLogic. She has over 20 years of experience in the SaaS, PaaS, IoT, and analytics space, and has worked with many customers across a variety of industries. With that, Janet will start us off with the state of the industry.
All right, I'm hoping that everything is coming through clearly. All right, so now let me talk to you a little bit about the state of the industry and some of the issues that people are facing. First, let's talk about the challenges in terms of how big of an issue it is. First of all, the average IT organization takes about 6 months to complete an integration on time. Now, if you think about it, 6 months is a long time to have to worry about things. However, on average, or in addition, on average, employees spend 392 hours each year searching, moving, and cleaning their data, resulting in a loss of more than 3.1 million. Now, if you think about it, that is pretty significant. The last thing is that organizations lose up to $140 billion from not having enough information at their fingertips.
To uncover those business opportunities. So if you think about it, that's a huge problem that organizations are facing. $140 billion lost every year is quite a bit. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the challenges that companies are facing. Today's organizations have to connect many disparate entities. And so here we are talking about endpoints such as cloud platforms, Internet of Things, and that could be devices and machines, mobile devices, social media devices, big data, data warehouses, things like subsidiaries, vendors, and partners. They also have the on-premises applications and data. And so all of these things pose quite a bit of a challenge in that enterprises have to connect all of that. They have to exchange information with all of these different entities. And so as a result, what you see is that the architecture is complex and companies are unable to quickly respond to business needs. And so that makes it very difficult for companies to be nimble and agile and to get the insights that they need to be able to be competitive in the industry. Now let's talk about what all of these trends are causing an industry or a company to face. Digital competition is increasing. More and more employees are using mobile devices. Now that it's cheaper and computing processes are even more plentiful, lots of data is being stored. So you've got data lakes, you've got companies that are hungry for analytics, and then you've got cloud and SaaS platforms that are also increasing in number. And so all of this places huge demands on IT, but IT delivery capacity has stayed largely static. And so you have this massive IT delivery gap, which means that companies need to find a better and a smarter way to do things. They cannot continue the way things are going right now. And so ask yourself, well, there are some technologies that can help with this, connecting all those different entities. However, these legacy technologies are very labor intensive, and the folks that can do all of these things are becoming scarcer and scarcer because they're retiring, and all of that knowledge goes away. And so traditional legacy technologies such as ESBs or Enterprise Service Bus, ETL, extract, transfer, and load technologies, or connecting point-to-point solutions using some sort of a SaaS solution, or even hand coding, it's just not very practical. They cannot keep up with the volume and the demands that employees are demanding of IT nowadays. And so what companies really need is an integration platform that can address all of these multiple challenges. And so not just one of the legacy technologies, but something that can serve the needs of multiple constituents. And so that could be folks from one end of the spectrum who are not technically savvy, all the way to the folks that are very technically savvy. Then they also have to deal with integration patterns. And integration patterns from an application is very different from one that comes from a data warehouse or a data lake, as well as processes. All of those are different. Then you have different deployment models. Data could be on premises, behind the firewall in a company's data center. It could be up in the cloud. It could be somewhere in between or embedded into another software. Fourth, you have different endpoints. Applications look very different and have different needs than data or APIs or mobile devices or what trading partners have when they're using EDI, for example, to exchange information with each other. And then lastly, you have data modes. Data comes in different speeds. It could be real time, and sometimes that's streaming large amounts of data or small amounts. It could also be event-based. So when something happens, then you're going to see that data needing to be integrated, or it could be batch, where it's once an hour, once a day. And so all of those are challenges that really an organization has to address. And ideally, it's done in one platform, such as an iPaaS. And so an iPaaS has to address all of these major use cases. These use cases could be things like application integration. And so there, the example is using Salesforce to connect to NetSuite. So it's a CRM connecting to an ERP. Another example could be data integration, where you have multiple data sources being integrated or pushed into a data warehouse like Snowflake. You also have API creation and management. Here, what you're worried about is creating multiple APIs, but all of these APIs then have to be governed and managed and standardized, and so you need API management. Next, you have things like B2B integration, where you have buyers and suppliers and partners that also need to be able to talk to each other. And then lastly, all of this is leading to data engineering. And what data engineering is about is taking all of that massive data and being able to do smarter analytics on it. So not just descriptive analytics, which is what the majority of a lot of the reporting tools are providing, but you want to go to that next level, which are predictive analytics and eventually prescriptive analytics. So predictive will tell you, well, what could happen in the future. And then prescriptive tells you, well, here's what you should do to avoid something bad happening. Okay, so those are all of those use cases that we have to talk about that an organization has to address. Let me turn it over to Karen, our moderator, for the first poll question.
Thank you, Janet. Now I'd like the attendees to participate and vote on a poll. Please click on the Vote tab under the webinar screen to vote. The question poll is, what is the greatest pain point facing your organization is facing today? Please select one of the following. Connect legacy and cloud-based technologies, where you need to connect older on-premises systems with newer cloud applications. Multi-cloud environment is where you have data residing in multiple environments, which can include a combination of Microsoft Azure, AWS, or Google Cloud. As your company grows and evolves, you may find your organizations acquiring more applications. And fourth, or you may see an explosion of data and the need to obtain insights based on that data. And finally, you may face the challenge of having or not having the skill sets you need to do integrations. So please click on the Vote tab and vote if you haven't already. Okay. So the results are very interesting. We have about 44% saying that connecting legacy and cloud-based technologies are the biggest pain point, with the lack of skill sets following as a second runner-up. So Alan, do you see these percentages fairly common amongst the organizations you work with?
Hi everyone. Yes, actually, this is very much resonates with what I'm seeing in the many clients I'm serving, where they are in this journey of adapting all these cloud apps, where they need to integrate their on-prem system with the cloud technology, and with this explosion growth of adapting new apps, and there's so much more demand on building out integration, and there's very little resources internally to be able to provide this type of services. So, which is why the lacking of skill set is really coming. The second on this list is really relevant, and fortunately that the material that will be going through the rest of this presentation address a lot of these pain points.
So now, why don't you walk through some of the pain points that you see organizations you work with are facing today?
Absolutely. So virtually all industry are going through this digital transformation and to be more digital, more mobile and social. And the byproduct of all these changes and transformation is the exponential growth of data. And what we want to go through here is, in most organizations, you're likely going to have already a set of on-premise middleware allowing to integrate your on-premise systems. And as these organizations are moving to the cloud and they're going to be starting to explore these more likely this line of business type of integration platform, what we call them iPaaS. And once they have learned these solutions aren't capable to address all their needs, and the hope is that they don't learn it in the hard way and discover the lack of discovering the lack of this capability, and further exploring these more enterprise-grade cloud integration platform, what we call them iPaaS, Integration Platform as a Service. And now I'll explain this in greater details. Let's just say in a typical journey of an organization where you have all these on-premise systems and you are going through this journey of adapting net new cloud applications. And now that you have, the need to integrate cloud applications, and you still have these on-premise systems, and which really means that you have a hybrid environment. You have a need to integrate both, integrate system between on-premise into the cloud or vice versa. And it's a natural progression that you'll be going through this journey of standing up a data warehouse, having big data environment, or even machine learning, and the need of getting all this environment connected, and ultimately be able to give you ability to do all this analytics and reporting and dashboarding, and to provide greater insight back to the business. And now that we already established what a typical journey looks like, this trajectory of where everybody is going, let's talk about those of organizations that are currently have this on-premise, all this on-premise system and using a middleware to do all the integrations. And when you starting to adapt these cloud SaaS applications, and the challenge of be able to use an on-premise middleware to support this integration is there's a lot of different there's a lot of conflicts in that situation. And the reason being is that these SaaS applications upgrade multiple times in a year, unlike your on-premise system, which doesn't get an upgrade at least 2 or 3 years in between their upgrades. Or in a situation where you need an event-driven type of use case where an event happens in your cloud apps, what we call them a webhook, and allowing that public SaaS application to initiate an integration back into your on-premise middleware, which means that we're going to ask your network and security team to open up their firewall to allow a public endpoint to read into their networks, which is also often a challenge. And then lastly, since these cloud applications are often as easy as swiping a credit card from a line of business, your middleware is not going to be able to keep up with the pace with the less optimal development environment that it has today. And now, transitioning us to now you're starting to look in this line of business cloud integrated platform. integration platform called iPaaS. These are more, this type of solution provide much greater ease of use and allowing the line of business to perform integration among themselves without a lot of technical knowledge. But with all the simplicity that this solution provide, it comes at a cost. These solutions also have very limited capabilities to support complex use cases, as we have listed on the top of the first bullet. And these also have neither no or limited ability to integrate with on-premise systems. And lastly, when all the out-of-the-box functionality is exhausted, and they're likely not going to have an alternative ways for you to work around those problems with because they have very little to no extensibility capability in this case. And now that we have to speak to the point where on-premise middleware will not be able to support your needs, and these more line of business iPaaS solutions are also having very limited capability. They're not able to support all your needs. And the hope is that the next thing that you looked into is this enterprise-grade cloud integration platform. And these cloud, what we call them iPaaS, which are perfect fit to support integration in a hybrid environment where you have systems that's on the ground and in the cloud, and have all the capability that you're going to need to be able to help you integrate both of those type of environment and hybrid as well. But what the challenge are in most of the other vendor in this space, that they can do these hybrid integration really well, but what about the rest of the journey that we have speak to, the data warehousing, the big data and machine learning capability, and you still will need a solution to assist you with this remaining journey and allowing you to operationalize these more advanced capability that you're going to need in the future. Which brings us to SnapLogic, which is the only platform that I'm aware of which have the capability to not only do what other iPaaS can do and beyond. Because it have the ability to fully support the remaining transformational journey that your organization is going through. In other words, this is the only solution that is going to be able to future-proof for the growth and the scale of your organization demands. I'm going to turn it over back to Karen for another pool question for the moment.
Thanks, Alan. There's the second poll question that I'd like the attendees to complete. So click on the Vote tab to participate. The question is, what is the most common technology that you're using to address your integration pain points? So please select one of the following. Number one is ESB, which usually helps connecting on-premises applications and systems. ETL, a tool for data integration. APIs, which usually requires developers to build integrations by hand coding APIs. Number four, custom coding, or iPaaS, which is also a hybrid integration platform that enables you to achieve application, data, device, and API integrations, and so forth. So please click on the Vote tab and vote if you haven't already. All right, so some of the some of the results actually came in pretty equal. So most of the folks in the audience said that they do integrations via APIs mostly, and the second runner-up is using ETL and/or iPaaS. So, Alan, in terms of your experiences working with organizations, do you see most folks using APIs as well, or the type of integration tools like ETL common?
Yes. So there's definitely an explosion of growth in the API realm, and what people, at least my interpretation of APIs are, you are exposing an API for either internal consumption or even external consumption, like even partners and vendors and maybe even customers of yours. It depends on the industry you're in, and to provide this modern interface for people to access certain type of information, and which is or even create your own portal and supporting a website that you stand up for internal external use. So there's which is really why you have the highest percentage, because there's all this different set of use case what an API can do.
Okay. Thank you, Alan.
So I'm going, now that we have established, talking through the typical journey and, the different kind of solutions that you currently have or in the process of exploring others, like, the iSaaS or the iPaaS. I wanted to go through 3 customer examples and how they tackle their pain point through their transformational journey. The first one is a leading work management platform provider that is a cloud solutions, and they're in this hyper growth environment, and they're going through the increasing the amount of disparate data that they adopt many different cloud apps, and this throughout the organization there's all these different apps that they're leveraging on from a business standpoint, and each one of these SaaS apps usually actually offer their own analytics capability, but what it doesn't address is the analytics needs to support the business itself to make data-driven decisions. The reason being is that you have within a single major process in the sales department, for example, you have half a dozen these apps, and each one they have their own analytics. You won't be able to ask a question across these multiple apps unless you stand up a data warehouse where you can ingest all this data into a centralized place, so that you'll be able to ask much more holistic type of questions. And another pain point that they're running into is that because there's all these apps that they have introduced to a process, they're also not able to keep up with the pace of these apps being adopted and help the business to automate a lot of these processes, and which leads them to and they were using an iSaaS solution at the time, and they were exceeding all their limits of what this platform can do, which leads them to switch over to SnapLogic. And they were able to achieve about 4 times of the productivities and to deliver faster integrations and be able to fulfill more integration projects over time. And all of their integration now can be done within 30 days, and oftentimes in a matter of days, not even talking about weeks. And be able to move a lot of data volume between different systems as well. Another example is Box, a content management SaaS provider that I used to work at, and what as a cloud first have a cloud first strategy within the IT infrastructure, and unfortunately the iPaaS that they have chosen in prior is very code intensive, and which require many developers to be able to provide these integration solutions, and they're not able to quickly scale the amount of application that they have adopted, they literally have over 100 different SaaS apps if you count every single apps. And there are roughly about 50 of these core apps that they are leveraging on across the company. And they also have a huge increase in demand on the speed of the data between all these different systems because of the pace that the business is operating under. And which is why they also have switched over from the other iPaaS vendor into SnapLogic, and to be able to achieve, building out, over 100, close to about 200 of these automations, and be able to connect with all these different applications that they have adopted throughout the organization, and at the same time to have about $1 million, cost avoidance on these integration projects. And ultimately, they're able to increase their volume of document also processed within an hour, and how much data that they will put through into those systems. And I want you to pay attention to this, enterprise architecture that they had. There's begin, middle, and end. And all these changes is being made within a single year. And the reason they're able to have this type of, pace of changing the type of application they're relying on to run the business is because they have a very robust integration platform, allowing them to doing all the data dump from the existing apps, doing all the data migration to the new apps, and re-hooking up all the integration that they're moving forward with. And I remember we even did a marketing system replatform where we have Elica responses in HubSpot, and we migrated to Marketo environment, and we did the whole thing in a matter of 6 weeks. And that consists of about 16 different integrations, and we move about 40 million rows of record. And with any other traditional on-premise middleware or iPaaS or even other alternative iPaaS, it's just unheard of to be able to do this type of volume of the data. And then this kind of pace. And lastly, my last example is this top management consulting company that I work with, where they have two pain points. One is that they have a web portal initiative where they need to build out this web portal to support a lot of these internal processes, and by exposing a bunch of APIs out of their existing system and to this more modern web solutions. And second is that their external consultancy, where they're working with their clients, where they're doing a lot of data analysis, but before they can actually do the work, they need to get all this data into their internal environment, and there's just all this effort that's put into it, and it's very time consuming, and oftentimes some of these data is really large. It's really hard to get them transfer and deliver into their internal systems, and which is why they also have chosen SnapLogic to tackle these challenges, and resulting in 93% of improvement in delivering projects and enabling these powerful and lightweight cloud platforms that they were able to offer, and about 3.6 million of cost reductions in maintaining maintenance costs and deflected in an annual basis, and increased organizational agility, and about 9 times of the productivity gain through the SnapLogic, and reducing about from 9 FTE to 3 FTE. So this is really significant from a dollar amount standpoint, or even from an SLA, from a service to delivery standpoint. And with that said, I'm going to turn it back over to Janet.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alan. Okay, so let me go ahead and summarize the key takeaways from all of the pain points that Alan discussed, as well as how 3 companies are addressing their challenges. So first, he talked about the work management platform provider. So if you remember, this work management platform provider was going through multiple acquisitions. And so what was happening was an increasing amount of disparate data was buried in different instances coming from all the companies they had acquired. It made it difficult to perform analytics to support business decision-making. Also, they were using an integration vendor that required a large amount of technical resources, which they didn't have. And as a result, they had very slow integration, implementations, and constant delays to the business. So that was the first example. The second example Alan discussed was about Box, the content and file sharing platform. So as you know, Box is a cloud-first company. So it also had to have a cloud-first approach to IT infrastructure and integration. But unfortunately, their integrations were code-intensive, which drained developer productivity. Plus, they needed to quickly scale to handle the more than 50 applications across the company that Alan had mentioned. And they also needed to increase the speed of their data movement from one system to another. So that was another issue that Box was dealing with. And then finally, Alan talked about the leading management consultancy that he worked with, which had more than 25,000 employees around the world. And their technology architecture just simply could not keep up with the demand from all of the field offices and all of the practitioners for the type of analytics that they needed to support their customers. So this consultancy had to arm their employees who weren't very technical to obtain their own insights, and they needed a better approach. They needed an integration platform that had an intuitive user interface and a more modern platform that would eliminate needing multiple tools just to integrate and connect a myriad of platforms. And so that's really what they were facing, and that's what Alan helped this company to deal with. Okay, so what you see is a quick summary of the challenges that they were facing and then some of the benefits that they achieved as a result of using the SnapLogic platform. So now let's talk about some additional things to help you to do a better job of delivering the insights and analytics to support your company. What we have here is a checklist to help you to select an iPaaS. But before you really get into, okay, what's a good iPaaS, what will work for me, you need to have clarification on 3 different things. First, you have to define your use cases. What are you trying to do? Is it digital transformation / process digitization, or are you trying to make your processes more efficient? That's the first one. The second is perhaps you're migrating to the cloud, and that could be your data stores. It could be your applications. So that's another common issue. A third could be, is your IT department's budget static? Do you need your IT department to be more agile? So that could be another use case. But whatever those are, you have to define those ahead of time. You don't want to have the features and functionality kind of dictate what you want. You want to be very clear on what you need. The second is you need to determine who's going to use this. What are their skill sets? And there's a huge range of people, right? You have technical users who could be IT or integration specialists. Second, you could have ad hoc or business users who are folks that don't have that skill set, and they only need to use it once in a while, or they aren't going to be able to get into the details of building or coding, and so that's important. And then you have folks that are somewhere in between. So it's very clear that you need to know what their skill sets are and what % of those users will be using the platform, because that will influence what you will select. And then third would be to identify your buying criteria, right? So is it ease of use? Is that more important? Is it fit for the use cases that you have? Is it that you need to be able to launch very quickly because perhaps you have an initiative that needs to be completed in a short amount of time? Is the pricing and the total cost of ownership important to you? And remember, it's not just the fee that you pay for the annual subscription. You have to have people and training and so forth. And so you need to know if the platform if users can quickly learn how to use the platform, or is it going to require a lot of training, and then is it going to require specialized skill sets to be able to use it, because all of that goes into that total cost of ownership. Then you have support and service. what is the iPaaS platform provider providing in terms of support and service and ongoing care. Then there's user experience, right? Because the amount of experience will also be directly proportional to the productivity that you're going to get. And then finally, your functional requirements that you need. So if you've defined all of these three things, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you the iPaaS specific checklist. And so here's some specific things that you need to ask when you engage with an iPaaS or a hybrid integration platform vendor in terms of their capabilities. So you want to ask, which data sources do you support? And here are the most popular ones, but there are multiple others. Then is it scalable? How well is it performant when we're talking about large amounts of data? So it's one thing for it to integrate perhaps, say, an expense management system to maybe your CRM. But it's another thing to be able to deploy that across business units, across geographies. And it's also another thing to have that integration provider be able to work just as fast with very large volumes of data. So maybe they're connecting their data marts and data warehouses to a data lake, and maybe some of it's in the cloud, some of it is on premises. So you have to make sure that who you select can take care of all of your use cases, ideally in one platform, as opposed to you having to have multiple platforms, which you then have to you have to integrate your integration platforms. That impacts productivity. Next is deployment models. Does it support, your data sources that are on premises, in the cloud, or somewhere in between? Pricing and total cost of ownership, of course, is always going to be one of the criteria. And then data modes. Find out, what types of modes do they support in terms of the data coming back and forth. Then user personas. Ask, who are your ideal personas? Who can be productive and how long does it take? And then finally, take a look at all of the programs to ensure that you're going to be successful long after the ink has dried on the contract. You want to know what kinds of support they have and does it fit your needs? What about the services that the professional services they offer? What about training and certification? Is it only in person? Is it self-paced? Can you do it online? Does it have a community where you can ask your peers and other folks questions and get answers? What kinds of partners do they have? What are those partners certified? Are those partners in the location where you are? And then finally, do they have a customer success manager, for example, somebody that can stay dedicated to your needs and help you out long after you have gone live? And so these are all things that you want to take a look at. And now let's talk about some additional resources. So one of the places you can go is click on the Attachments and Link tab and take a look at all of the resources that we have available there. One of them is an iPaaS buyer guide. Right? So this walks you through step-by-step what you need to look at, what you need to keep in mind when you embark on this journey of selecting an iPaaS or a hybrid integration platform. Next is Box.com case study. So this is one of one of the companies that Alan Young has worked with. Take a look at their experience and the challenges that they face and how they approached it and what were their outcomes. It gives you an idea of one of the how one company approaches it. You can also request a demo. So perhaps you have a use case and you want to see it at work and you want somebody to show you how to do that. So you can certainly do that. You can also start your complimentary trial of the SnapLogic Intelligent Integration Platform. And because perhaps you're hands-on, you want to be able to try it out for yourself. So I encourage you to take advantage of the resources there. And certainly all folks that have registered for this will get a copy of the presentation slides that we've shared with you. So don't worry if you weren't able to take all the notes that you needed. We will make sure that you get a copy. Okay, and with that, I'm going to hand it over to Karen to manage our Q&A. So feel free to ask questions through the tab that's open for you. And we have quite a few questions already in, so we'll let Karen manage the handling of those questions.
Thanks, Janet. So there are a couple of questions that came in, and if you need a couple of minutes to submit your questions, please submit them on the Q&A box. All right, so let's start off with some of the questions that already came in. So one of the questions is, what would a typical iPaaS use case be? Could you give me an example? So, Alan, would you be able to provide that example of
Sure,
a typical
absolutely.
iPaaS? Thank you.
Yes. So again, these iPaaS vendors are more tailored to the line of business. More usually in the sales and marketing function, or even in the finance function, where they have all this point and click, drag and drop type of from a design time standpoint. So you feel very empowered to build integration between Salesforce to Zendesk or to NetSuite and Marketo of the world, and where where you're able to pretty much those are much at a more very cost effective, where you can just like some of these apps where you can just swipe a credit card, you probably can get to those solutions and be able to build some of these integration for your one-off set of use case. And what I try to explain to people is that as soon as you wanted to expand this capability to organization-wide, you wanted to be able to tackle all different type of use cases and all different functions, and which is really where you're going to find the limitation of this iPaaS solution, that it have the very limited extensibility, very limited ability for you to integrate with on-prem solution, because they so what we call sometimes we call these like runtime agents. They likely only have a cloud agent, so you have any on-premise system that you want to integrate with, and you won't be able to actually connect a public system into your network. Your security and networking not going to allow you in most cases. And some of them might even have an agent they can deploy to your network. But what likely going to happen is that these are tunnels that they establish. So the actual data processing is still in the cloud. So depending on the sensitivity of this data, you might not like the fact that your data is leaving outside your network, even though you're integrating data between two on-premise systems. So, which is what I'm trying to convey, to be mindful of how do you future-proof yourself when you looking at a solution. And iPaaS I felt there's a lot very short-sighted or it's very narrow set of use cases that you could be able to address, or simple, and those use cases are very simplistic.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Another question that came in is, my line of business already uses a solution for integrating a couple of SaaS apps. Will SnapLogic meet our needs for a company-wide platform?
Well, I would assume most companies go want something a lot more unified across the whole company. Imagine you have, each line of business spinning up their own solution and integrating things. But what about when you want to integrate between different functions? When marketing might do one, and when sales will do another, but there's actually some continuity between marketing and sales, right? So your marketing needs come through, and then to your sales, and you're going to need to do some cross-functional integration at the time, and eventually get to finance. So, and you're going to find yourself, having this collection of tools, and first it's hard to manage, where if you have multiple tools inside the organization to do things that are similar. Would you have two CRM? Would you have two, two ERP? You likely don't want to, unless you're forced into by acquisition. But by nature, you don't want to position yourself to have multiple solutions within the organization as a starting point. That's from an architecture perspective.
Okay. Thank you, Alan. So there's a question for you, Janet. Who are your current clients, and who are the targeted clients, and what kind of industries and sectors can they benefit from your services?
Thank you. So if this question is about the SnapLogic platform, what you'd want to know is it is a horizontal platform. And so it is not specific to any one industry, and therefore it doesn't work for other industries. So SnapLogic has customers that are, across all industries, whether that's software and technology services, healthcare and pharmaceuticals, consumer goods, financial services, etc. There are some security credentials that will vary from company to company. So our healthcare and pharmaceutical customers, for example, appreciate the fact that the platform is HIPAA compliant. And so certainly there will be some security and certifications that will vary from industry to industry. But the nice thing is that SnapLogic does recognize that security is important and supports that. But other than that, we have customers across a wide range of industries.
Thanks, Janet. So there's a question for you, Alan. What is the most important aspect to expedite a project performance?
So I'm not quite sure what you mean by performance. Performance by like time to delivery. When the business define a project, you wanted to deliver that project, as soon as possible, and that could be a performance, or it could be the automations that you build is so performing at runtime. So, and which both are actually valid. And I think because with all this cloud application that the business are adopting, and they are this enterprise apps become so consumerized, right? Where it's very easy to use, and you have that almost turnkey kind of experience, and you likely want your integration platform to have that same level of caliber, be able to deliver this integration in a very fast fashion. So we talk about sometime in even hours or days. We're not talking about weeks and months. And also where your integration is so robust that you can handle large volume of data or maybe high frequency of those executions. So all these are all very, very relevant, but it all comes back to your set of use case and what those use case SLA ask for.
Okay, thanks, Alan. I think there was a follow-up question on the iPaaS question earlier. So the attendee asked, does that mean that iPaaS eliminates the need of iPaaS at all? Can and should iPaaS be used instead of iPaaS?
My personal opinion, yes. If you have an iPaaS, there really have no reason for you to have an iPaaS. If you pick the right iPaaS solution, speaking of, because iPaaS could potentially be more cost-effective. That when you want to do something simple and you want to do something quick, but then as the enterprise architect, I want more future-proof. I wanted to do things that I adapt would be more holistic from addressing organization-wide issues, not just one-off issues here and there within the line of business. So, having said that, having the right iPaaS solution in place, there really have little to no reason why you need an iPaaS. Actually, while I was at Box, we actually had an iPaaS there as well, and then we've proven that there's really this redundancy is unnecessary.
Okay. Thank you. A couple more questions before we end the call. SaaS vendors are providing similar solutions. In a multi-cloud world, which way should enterprises go with, and why?
Yes, so true. Like SaaS provider have their own integration tool sometimes, but if you think of as putting yourself back to your enterprise architecture head on, where you want to choose the best of breed solution for your own organization, not for the best for that one particular vendor. So you want to choose a solution that have the interoperability, that have all the compatibility between all the different cloud without any bias. Me as a buyer at one point is like I would second guess the vendor if they also, if the integration is coming as a complementary solution that they offer at a later point, and which means that either it's not their core competency, or even if they're doing, even they have decent amount of integration capability, it's really hard for me to believe that they would not have any bias about their own platform, meaning that they likely to spend more investment on helping people integrate into their system, not necessarily what the actual general public needs are. So that is why I would factor that into my decision making on that front.
Thank you. Okay, another question is, how does iPaaS help me with challenges like scaling integration processes better than a traditional ESB or ETL?
Right. So let me explain about ESB real quick. So Enterprise Service Bus. So this has become more of a main capability that most organizations have in the 90s or early 2000s. And the reason being is that at the time, all these are on-premise systems. Those systems are the robustness of those systems and the resiliency of those interfaces are not at the same level of what the current SaaS provider can offer, which is why you need to have this kind of very highly resilient middle layer called ESB, where we wanted to make sure the message that we receive will not be lost, and then you want to make sure you have this guaranteed delivery to the target. And where we are moving to the cloud, where all these SaaS provider, the uptime is greater than most of your on-premise system, and their interface is very robust, is being used with all their customers. So, with that sense, you are switching over from this having that level of resiliency in the middle layer. We're starting to see that we are relying on our endpoint, our SaaS provider, to provide that resiliency. So we call these stateless approach, that we don't necessarily need to manage the state. Instead, we leverage this SaaS endpoint to manage the state of those integrations. And ETL is extract, transform, and load. And we also seeing, and this is usually done between databases, and with the technology also being evolved in this database environment where they're a lot more performant. So we are now also seeing ELT. That's actually a much better approach, where we extract, load, and then allow all the transformation done inside these more modern database technology that is available today. And so, and iPaaS is really where you want to focus all your emphasis into the ability to integrate the different type of system, regardless if their location, meaning on the cloud or on-prem, and be able to well support more modern interface like REST, JSON over REST. And one thing to point out that SnapLogic interpret everything into JSON. For those of you who know what it means, and this is the more modern, lightweight type of data structure. And the platform is a streaming architecture, which means is that you can allow you to process much greater data volume that you never would do in most of the other alternatives that you have seen. So I have seen execution that can handle hundreds of millions of records or even billions of records in a single call. So and it's really hard to find a solution that can that kind of scale.
Great, thank you, Alan. So that's all the questions we have for today's webinar. And if you have any questions after this webinar, please send them to info@snaplogic.com, and we will also follow up with an email to all the people who have attended. So thank you for attending today's webinar. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.